Teachers of Reddit, what is the most depressing thing a student has told you about their home life? School counselor here. My second year I had a courageous student who suffered from a rare, debilitating disease. She didn't have many friends because she was never in school and always in hospitals. She loved reading though. She brought books with her to the hospital. Unfortunately, due to the disease, her eyesight was now deteriorating, and she knew she would eventually go blind. She cried in my office that she would miss her books, and didn't want to be alone in the dark. I couldn't help crying with her. She transitioned to audio books on her iPod. This was roughly 14 years ago, a time when middle schoolers didn't have smartphones. A year later she passed away. My hope is she's at peace, reading all the books she wants, with other friends she's met. This was a few years ago. This student came into class one day really late and escorted by some official. He threw his bag on the ground and sat in his seat frowning. Turns out, the day before he went home and his foster parents had decided they no longer want him, so he went into the care of social services. Everything about this child went downhill from there. I was also in an interview with a mother and her son, and she straight up tells us that she's not too concerned about her son as he's not her favorite child. The defeated look on her son's face still tears me up. Taught at an inner-city charter school. Had a bright 6th grade girl who started sleeping during my classes, which was not like her. When I asked after school what was up, she told me that her family, her 2 younger sisters, and crackhead mom, moved into the homeless shelter, and the last time she slept through the night, all their stuff got stolen. Hey there, are you subscribed yet? Please do. Also leave a like on this video to help out the channel. I had a 10-year-old crying and wishing she was dead. Her older brothers at home were being awful to her, bullying and hitting her. She was saying I should just let her go so she could kill herself and then she wouldn't be a bother to us or her brothers anymore. Sat her down with the teacher, a cup of tea, some cookies, and talked with her throughout the afternoon. Not much we could do about the brothers, but she left with a smile and came back at school the next day with a smile as well. Now I'm just keeping my eye on her in case things go bad again, but so far so good. Apparently talking to us encouraged her to tell her mother about everything that happened, so at least someone at home also kept an eye out for her. I had a student not come to school for 2 weeks when he finally showed he was limping and his foot was wrapped up in a large dirty ace bandage. I called him to my office after school that day to check in on him. He told me that he had been in the river fishing for his dinner 2 weeks ago and slipped on a rock. He cut his foot so badly that he couldn't walk until today to make it to school. I asked about going to the doctor, but he hadn't seen his parents in so long that he didn't know how to get to them for help getting to the hospital. I called CPS, got him help as much as they could offer. We found out he was living in a tent. The house had been foreclosed on when his parents disappeared. A bunch of teachers chipped in and got him groceries, clothes, and started driving him places after that. Today, over 2 years later, he's working a job and one of our teachers still clothes and feeds him. The student is too prideful to live with anyone and kind of couch hops now. But he's so strong and resilient. He's an incredible human and I think he will change the world one day. A student's mother shows up for the first time in almost a year and she's well dressed and looking like someone straight out of a fashion magazine. Had the latest phone, flashy jewelry, overall expensively dressed. The student on the other hand was always shabbily dressed and once went without a blazer for a week because his parents weren't buying him one. We allowed him to wear his sports jersey in the class, which is normally not allowed, and constantly called the parents to no avail. She showed the slightest possible interest in her child, telling us to make him study however we wanted and even hinted hitting him if he didn't behave. A lot of talking and counseling later, it turned out that the student was actually from a well-to-do family, but the parents didn't get along well. Father went out on business trips for weeks together where he was having multiple affairs and the mother was doing the same at home. It was an open secret. The child acted weird just to get some attention in school which he wasn't getting at home. I really felt for the child. He was 11 at the time. I am hungry. How much time until the break? Kid who didn't have food at home. I will quit school and become a criminal, because robbing is the only thing I'm good at. Teenager who had a very bad situation at home. Edit for some context. I was a teacher at a public school in a poor region in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and many children had problems at home. Many of them didn't have a father, lived in small houses in the slums, etc. The first child didn't have food at home. All teachers knew about it. His mother had a lot of problems and all his siblings were in the same situation, so every day the most important thing for him was to eat, obviously. The teenager apparently had food, but there was a history of violence in his family and he had already committed crimes, and he probably felt empowered by it, because he apparently felt bad and stupid in other activities. I wasn't the regular teacher. I was part of an NGO that offered specific attention to students that were behind the others, so every day I would go to their regular class and pick 6 to 10 of them to have special classes, so at the beginning they felt really bad and other students were calling them stupid. At the end of the program many students wanted to join us and our students felt much more confident in general, so it was great, but obviously we didn't solve the hunger problem and this teenager wasn't convinced that he had a future out of crime. Got a message today about why a student could not come to class yesterday. Sorry I couldn't come to class, there were gunshots right outside my apartment and I thought I was going to die. The police did come eventually and I had to give a statement. I will get the work from yesterday done today. Thanks. Yeah, you get that extension. A few weeks ago one of my online kids had a band-aid on her left temple, so I asked what happened. She said, my mom was angry with me and threw a pencil and it stuck in my head, with blood. I'm glad you are enjoying this video. Before we continue, don't forget to like, subscribe and leave a comment. I don't want to give out too many details, but I've had to fill out 4 CPS reports in my 4 years of teaching. 3 for students that either confided in me or had signs that they were being physically abused, and 1 that was sexual abuse from the child's father. It's honestly the worst part of the job, having to hear and see just the awfulness some kids have to go through. My mom is an English teacher and once told me about a child, 13M, whose mother had committed suicide a few years ago. In a creative writing task a few years after it happened, the question revolves around finding out a secret. The boy then wrote a descriptive piece about finding a body hanging in his front room lifelessly swinging. Heartbreaking stuff, crying face. He had his counselors upped and said he just write it from the heart. Poor guy. I had a girl playing with something while sitting at the carpet. Rolling it back and forth and putting it in her mouth and taking it out and rolling it around again. I told her to give it to me when the other students started their independent work. She gave me this large green pill. At recess I ask her about it and she says her mom and dad give her and her siblings one of these every night to make them sleep. I take the pill to admin and tell them what she told me before searching Google Images to find out what it could be. I find a short list and go back to admin and I'm told it isn't my job to worry about that. I try several times that day to get answers and they say they think it's melatonin, so stop overstepping my place. This girl and her siblings are in and out of foster care and come to school with no food and filthy clothes. She came to school in a sweatshirt covered in dried blood 3 days in a row. Her parents wouldn't even sign the papers to get the kids the free school lunches. I forged the mom's signature every month. My mom taught in a very low-income school and every year would go to the dollar store and pick up Christmas presents for all of her students. She knew that many of them didn't get any other gifts for the holiday. She also had stories about how they needed to be careful when constructing standardized tests because there were students who might answer a question like, "What do you do when you're hungry?" with, "Go to bed," or similar things. It was my first year teaching and the holidays were approaching. A second-grade student asked me why Santa visits everyone else's home, but skips hers. On Christmas Eve, my father and I played Santa. We dropped off gifts at their home for each child, with of course the permission of the legal guardian's parents were in jail. His parents would only give him a pillow and blankets for his bed if he had all A's. I contacted the school counselor and it was true, along with the fact that all of the food was locked away and he was only given specific amounts per day. Per DCFS this was not considered abuse. I made a deal with him that as long as he was doing his best, his grade would never drop below an A. He teared up. 5-year-old girl was crying at the lunch table. I tell her she's going to see her mom soon and it's okay. I don't know her very well at this point. She goes, "My mom's in jail." So I quickly go, "Your dad, then?" And she goes, "He's in jail, too." Her twin sister says, "We live with our grandma." I'm about to cry at this point, so I ask if they need anything. Can I get them anything? They ask for candy. I always carry caramels in my purse because these are safe candies and the kids love them and know I have them. I gave them each a handful of caramels and sat with them until their grandma came an hour later. We colored together. They each saved caramels for their grandma. I'll never forget those 2 little girls. Not a teacher but a student. I was absent a lot but always handed him an excuse note the next day. One day he came to me with all of them and told me that none of the signatures matched and therefore had to be forged somehow. I told him it was because sometimes my mom was really tired when I get her to sign it. In reality, sometimes she was too high to hold a pen and could barely scratch her name for me. Anyway, by the end of the school year it was very obvious to all my teachers that my mother had a drug problem. And when he took his proof to the office, they informed him that my mother had called in every one of my absences. He apologized the next day. A female university student in China told me her mother tried to sell her for $8 as a baby.